And outspake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate. To every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods?
Blake drove for another 10 minutes until he reached the outer limits of what he called the city where I live. Marisol looked out the window and raised her eyebrow. "Dude, I live in Manila. This is not a city. This is barely a town," she scoffed. Blake rolled his eyes and pulled into a residential neighborhood that was located between an elementary school and the combined middle school-high school. Aisling, having taken the shape of a small cat, was dazzled by the streetlights and kept blinking her eyes repeatedly. When Blake turned a corner, he reached up and pressed a button near the roof of the car. A garage door, attached to a house, began to open on its own. Aisling was startled and retreated into the folds of Marisol's coat. "This is my place," Blake said. "I'm gonna try and get in touch with Callie. The rest of you eat some food and try to rest." At least for a few moments, Marisol was just like Aisling and Sebakira, looking around every part of Blake's house with equal parts wonder and awe. "Just one American lives in a house this big?" Marisol gasped. "No, my dad's here too, somewhere," Blake replied. "Don't you live in a house like this, Marisol?" Sebakira asked. "No, I live in a tiny apartment with my mom and siblings," Marisol replied. "You could fit my whole place into Blake's kitchen." "And you're just going to allow us to eat the food?" Aisling asked, peering into the pantry. "Eat the groceries. Robinson family rule," Blake said. "Now, let me find... Dad! Hey, Dad, where are you?" Blake disappeared down a hallway. Marisol looked around again and suddenly started regretting turning down Blake's original offer to pay her for her work as a beta reader. Marisol spent a few moments wondering whether she should open up to Blake about how close her family was to living in poverty, but then she decided against it. Talking about the topic would require Marisol admitting to things she was not proud of. A noisy clattering sound caught Marisol's attention. Aisling had withdrawn a large plastic bag from the pantry and tore it open, causing hundreds of tiny brown candies to scatter loudly across the wood floor. Sebakira was holding onto her sides, laughing. Aisling looked like she was going to cry. "I just wanted to see what they were," the fairy choked. "They smelled delicious." Speaking of smells," Sebakira muttered. The lioness tilted her head toward the ceiling and took in several whiffs. At the same time, Marisol got down on her knees and grabbed one of the candies off the floor. She took a cautious nibble. "Chocolate," Marisol said. Then she popped the whole thing into her mouth and let out a happy squeal. "Chocolate-covered blueberries! I've had these before. They're so good!" Aisling's face lit up. She dropped to her hands and knees and began eating the little candies as fast as she could grab them. Each time Aisling popped a chocolate-covered blueberry into her mouth, she let out a moan of joyous ecstasy that could be easily mistaken for something less wholesome. Meanwhile, Sebakira was looking at the far end of the kitchen, where a pair of green eyes was looking out of the basement door. A tiny black cat, hidden in the darkness, locked eyes with Sebakira and licked his chops. "You're a brave one, aren't you?" Sebakira said to the cat. "Are your brothers nearby? I can smell them." The black cat flicked his tail and stood his ground. A moment later, Blake re-entered the kitchen, followed by another man. Marisol did a double take. "Who is this guy?" she said. The man standing next to Blake was a 60-year-old white American. He had a full beard of black and silver and a slightly jovial expression. This is my dad, JD, Blake said. I know, naming characters after myself and my family is an uncreative idea. I've heard it all before, let's move on. J.D. Robinson looked from Aisling to Sebakira and finally to Marisol, a bewildered expression on his face. How does that work? Marisol asked incredulously. You're black, he's white. Blake narrowed his eyes and replied coldly. Never seen a mixed-race family before, huh? My mom's black, that's where I get it from. J.D. shrugged, pointed at Marisol, and said, So, you've started dating island girls now, huh? I told you so. Your taste would change as you got older. Both Blake and Marisol blushed. Dude, I'm not dating her. She's my beta reader, and she's child-sized, Blake snapped. What's wrong with being able to bench press your girlfriend? JD replied, giving his son a very mischievous grin. Sebakira was trying to hold back another laugh. We're not dating, and I'm not child-sized, Marisol replied. Said the kid who needs a booster seat, Blake shot back. 4 feet 10, Marisol seethed. Blake looked over Marisol's shoulder and spotted Aisling on the floor. Oh, God, he breathed. Aisling, how many of those did you eat? Aisling, human-shaped once again, was sitting cross-legged on the floor, clutching the bag of chocolate-covered blueberries in one hand and happily licking the fingers of her other hand. There was chocolate smeared around her lips. They're so good, Aisling declared. Blake pinched his nose. You're totally gonna get sick, he said. Bathroom is down that hallway to the right. The what? Aisling asked. She stood up and moved cautiously out of the kitchen, exploring the rest of the house. Blake's father watched her go, then looked back at Blake. I know I've been pushing you really hard to find a girlfriend, son, but you know you're only allowed one at a time, right? Blake looked as like he was going to explode. Marisol fought the urge to laugh at his expense, and she lost. So, Blake, having trouble finding girls? She sniped. Shut up, Blake retorted. He shook his head, then pulled a smartphone from his pocket. Meanwhile, I got a message from Callie. She's on her way here. She's got sidetracked at Capital Region Airport, but she's on the move again. Sidetracked? Sebakira asked. Did your friend say how she was waylaid? No, Blake replied, but she did say she would tell us about it when she got here. At that moment, a loud scream issued from the hallway. Blake, J.D., Sebakira, and Marisol ran out of the kitchen. Aisling had dropped the bag of candies and, in her fright, shapeshifted into a wolf. Hackles raised, she was growling at a small, white object in the hallway. Blake saw it and began to laugh. Calm down, Aisling. That thing isn't going to hurt you. What is it? Marisol and Sebakira both asked. My robot, Blake replied. When I was younger, I loved playing with Lego. Lego is a type of plastic construction toy. Anyway, I built a motorized, programmable robot out of Lego. That's what you're looking at, Aisling. His name is Asimov, and I think he likes you. Asimov let out a series of shrill beeps, and then spoke in a stilted, computerized voice. I am A51-M0V. Please identify. A robot, Sebakira replied. So it's not sapient. Blake winced. Well, the last time Callie was here, she insisted on using her nanobots to upgrade him. I really don't know what she did to him, as he just kind of lives in his own world now and I don't ask questions. Aisling snarled at Asimov. Hostile, Asimov declared, before turning around on its little plastic wheels and moving away. Blake's father, meanwhile, was looking at Aisling. Hey, Blake, is that the she-girl you were telling me about? Yeah, that's her, Blake replied. J.D. stepped into the living room. located adjacent to the hallway. He started running his hand across the bookshelf, looking for something. Aisling turned back into a girl. "Your father knows about my kind?" she asked. "My dad's side of the family is Irish," Blake explained. "Immigrated to America back in the 1880s. Blake's father returned moments later with a small green book in his hand. "Here, Blake," JD said. "You might need the glossary in the back of this book." It was a copy of The Dreaming Tree by C.J. Cherry. The final pages of the book were dedicated to a small glossary of Old English, Welsh, and Celtic names. The largest city in Michigan is called Detroit. It is a sprawling metropolis, and its location next to both a waterborne trade route and an international border make it the beating heart of Michigan's economy. Tucked away between Art Deco facades of bigger and better things is a quaint, three-story brick building. The second and third floors are covered in windows, each a little portrait into the lives of the folks living behind them. The first floor, though, has only a single oaken door behind a wrought iron security gate. On either side of it hangs a myriad of flags. A platypus skeleton on navy blue, an assortment of pride flags, and, of course, the proud flag of the city itself. Flags on flags, watched over by two women, one weeping at what was lost, the other comforting her with what was to come. "From the ashes we rise again," she seems to say. A humble sign above the door proclaims, "Whiskey in the jar." The establishment is a cozy bar, with restaurant-style seating available for those who wanted more than a drink. Nearly 36 taps stand tall in front of a wall of spirits that would make even the most seasoned connoisseur blush. Standing across the street from the bar, 4 people lurked in the shadows. Akira Robinson folded her arms and listened while one of her companions tried to argue with her. "I had him! Why the hell did you have Kiri pull me back?" Tenna Honora was furious. "To kill the author right now would have been a waste," Akira replied. "Remember what Malum told us before we went through the gate? We have to make this count for something. Taking down Blake is just the beginning of something greater. He must die at the right moment, and that was not it." Tenna folded her arms, momentarily looking a little like her younger self. "Sounds like you're just making excuses for Malum. He doesn't need this complicated plan. Just go in there, turn Blake into a red mist, move on to the next thing. It's not that hard." "You remain short-sighted," Akira replied. "We'll fix that in time." Kiri Ranginui, standing on Akira's right, nodded in assent. Then he produced a tablet computer. "Here we go," he announced. "The user called Chak1 just logged out of the forums. He's gone." The 4th member of the group shifted on their feet. "If you're right, we may be able to accelerate our plans," the 4th person said. "We could bring Malum into this world much easier than we thought." "I'll cross my fingers," Kiri replied. "I wish you luck, Your Majesty." A moment later, the heavy oak door opened, and someone stepped out of the bar. The person who emerged was a slender young Caucasian woman with dirty blonde hair. Kiri recognized her at once. Even though she was dressed in the garb of a barmaid, this woman was clearly a character from a story written by McCavity 116. "Incredible," Kiri breathed. "This Czech fellow actually managed to get Aaron Bowie to return to work, even after Blake told her to hide." "Let's not look a gift horse in the mouth," Akira said. Then she addressed the 4th person in her group. "Move. Now." Kiri locked eyes on the 4th person as they began to move. What happened next defied explanation, but this is roughly what Kiri saw. A female Maori warrior, dressed in nothing but a knee-length grass skirt and armed with a shark-toothed spear, began to cross the street. nimbly weaving her way between cars, trucks, and pedestrians. There were hundreds of people in the area, and yet no one acknowledged her. The warrior was plainly visible to Kiri, who held his eyes open, knowing that if he lost track of her for even a moment, he too would lose the ability to see her. Psionic energy rippled off the Mowri warrior as she advanced on the bar. Erin Bowie was now out of the door and iron security gate. She was walking away. The door started to swing shut. Out of an abundance of caution, Tenna retreated into the shadows of a nearby alleyway, where she drew a Gauss pistol and pointed it across the street, aiming directly at the back of Erin Bowie's head. Tenna held her fire. The security gate was almost shut. The Mowri warrior quickened her pace. She jumped and slid across the hood of a car, its driver completely oblivious to both her presence and action. With only 1 second to spare, the warrior reached the bar and stuck her foot in the gate. Then she reached forward and used a barely noticeable pulse of telekinesis to hold the heavy oak door open. She pushed by the gate and vanished inside of the bar, allowing the door to shut behind her. Vetu Kealoha was the main protagonist of a long-forgotten Mercavity 116 story, written in the early days of his time as a member of the Paradox Interactive forums. She was a 15-year-old Partogan girl who lived and died during a story event called The Wars of the Famine. Vetu was nearly distracted by the overwhelming abundance of food and drink in the bar, but she managed to keep her composure and regained focus. Vetu was making use of her special psionic power to remain undetected. So long as she held her focus, Vetu could stop other people from perceiving her presence. Unfortunately, this superpower could not defeat technology like security cameras. She would have to move fast. Holding her shark-tooth spear close, Vetu began to maneuver through the bar. She ducked behind a bearded man as he raised a glass and made a declaration in a mild Georgia accent. Then she skillfully evaded a British person wearing a Eurovilla t-shirt. After that, Vetu had a close call where an old man stared at her with such intensity that Vetu briefly feared she had been spotted. However, the old man was looking through her. He began speaking to someone behind her instead, someone who referred to this gentleman as the father of AAR land. Finally, Vetu found what she was looking for, a massive stack of bookshelves. Nearby, a wooden sign proclaimed this to be the inkwell. Just beyond the inkwell, on the other side of the bookshelves, Vetu could see a passageway. Vetu reached down to the flax band that held up her grass skirt. She withdrew a very small walkie-talkie and pushed the talk button 3 times. Akira was waiting for this very signal. It meant Malum would come to the real world far earlier than planned.